It's easy to get confused with Elementor's global colors. When does the primary color and secondary color apply? And what about the global fonts and the typography? I'm going to go over those settings and examples and show you how you can think a little bit more methodically and efficiently about them. If you're not familiar with setting your global colors and fonts, when you're on an Elementor page or post, go over here to where you have the hamburger in the top left, click that and then click Site Settings, and then you'll see global colors, global fonts and typography. What you would then do is go into here. We will go into these eventually, okay, one by one, and I will clarify why you definitely want to use them. Let's start with global colors first. I've already gone and set a color for primary, secondary, text, and accent. It's really simple, okay, to add any color. You just go in, either put the hex code in or pick and choose what you want. If you do want to add in a separate color, just click the plus sign here. Let's go and pick this red. Let's go over here and let's now pick a pink color as well. I'm just doing this on the fly, by the way. And if I want, I can rearrange the items and I can also delete items as well. So that's how you can go about setting colors. But why would you bother doing this? If, say, at some point in time, your client or yourself decide that we don't want to use that primary color now, we want to actually have a dark navy blue, you would change the color here. And if you've used the primary color on your website whereby you have ensured it was the primary color and you change it to blue, it will change across your website, which is a very methodical and efficient way to manage changes. Imagine you got a 100-page website and you got to go through now and change the header text on all of them or something like that. This could be super important, so this is why it's really good. But the purpose of the video is to clarify when do these colors apply. So have a look at what we've got here. Hey presto, here's my example page where you can see the colors along the top. Now let's focus on the primary. Whenever you add a heading from Elementor, okay, you know what I'm talking about down here where you have the heading, okay? Whenever you drop one of them in, it doesn't matter if it's a H1, H2, whatever, all the way down to paragraph and div as well. They will all adopt the primary color. So if your primary color was yellow, these would all be yellow. If you drop in an icon, it will also be the primary color. If you drop in an icon box, like what we see here, where you have the icon, a header, and a bit of text, that will adopt the primary color for the icon and the header. Of course it would, because look, it's done it here. But the text within will actually adopt the color of the text. So if your primary was yellow and your text was green, down here, this would have been yellow, yellow, green. Does that make sense? Okay. Now let's look at the secondary color. The secondary color, the blue, applies to like list items. So even though we have an icon list over here, because that was the icon box, by the way, this is the icon list. The icons are in primary color. Remember, look, the icons are primary. Can you see the logic here? It applies regardless. So the icons are primary. The text, though, is the secondary color. And if you take something like the counter, the number almost adopts like the primary color for the red, but the text underneath adopts the secondary color. Now, the secondary color isn't used that much, if I'm honest, which is a bit weird. I would have expected it to be used a lot more, but the primary color is the one that kicks in the most. The secondary color, you can see what's going on here. The text one is pretty self-explanatory. If you drop in a text editor, it doesn't matter what you select all the way down to paragraph and pre-formatted, it will adopt the text color. Except if you take this item over here, let me just click it. This is also a text editor. Okay, you can see it just down there. Let me scroll there. The text editor. This is a link. If you turn your text into a link, it actually adopts a completely different color. Now I'm using the Hello theme. So it's adopted the link color from the Hello theme. Now I am going to touch on the theme styles very, very shortly. So stay with me on this. Then we go to the accent color. That kicks in for your buttons. And when you're using anything like tabs, accordion, or even toggle down here as well. Let me just show you here. The active tab, or the active accordion, or the active toggle will always adopt the accent color. You can see it doing it there. The closed or inactive tabs, or the inactive accordion and toggle, will adopt the primary color. And a great example here is with the tab over here. All right, the active one is accent color. The inactive is primary. Look, can you see that? I've now made tab 2 active and the colors switch. So this is how the colors can kick in. Now, you might not worry about this because, to be honest, I'm guilty of this as well, is when you're building a website, you go in and tinker with the individual styling. Right? Wrong? I don't know. But if you are being very methodical and you're having a clear palette system for what the colors are, this can massively, massively help you out. Of course, if you go and create a fifth color and apply that to your heading, that will overwrite the primary color because you've gone and picked a different global color. Now, I want to come back onto something very, very important. If we go over to our settings for Elementor, I have got these two unticked, okay? And a lot of people tick them. A lot of people don't tick them. Let me just explain this. If you look at this at the moment, this says that if you check the box, this will disable Elementor's default colors and you will inherit the colors from the theme. Okay, so I am going to contradict myself, so stay with me on this. So if I check this, right, this will disable Elementor's default colors, right? This is not ticked. So look, I am using my default colors. I showed you them earlier, my global colors. I am using them. But now let me show you what happens if I go here, I tick this and I hit save. Look at my page now. Everything has just gone almost grey, right? Everything's gone grey, except the link. We will come back to this one, okay? The link still inherits the link color from the hello theme, which is interesting, but we will come back onto that. But look, my colors here at the top, they're still there because I've set my global colors. They stay, they don't go anywhere. But look at all of the items. They've all gone grey. And that was by me ticking this. So if you tick it, okay, the primary colors now do not apply. However, if I go to this header, okay, which is now defaulted to grey, I go to style and I go to the text color and I now say make that primary. Now it does bring it through. So I feel like you got two options here. If you set your colors and you want them to automatically feed through, you would untick this. If, however, you want everything to be defaulted to just like a grey color, it does depend on your theme. So the hello theme is defaulted to that. You might use another theme where the standard is blue, then everything will be blue until you go in and select it. So have a think about it. If you want to manually select every time you go in, and by the way, there is nothing wrong with that. I know I made it sound like, oh, if you want to do that. No, if you want to do it, go and do it. If, however, you want it to kind of pick up the fact that it's a primary and a secondary, how it automatically applies, then untick them and you'll be back to over here. So I just want to bear that in mind because I don't think that's been clarified or explained like in detail. Now the constant, regardless of whether I clicked it or not, was this text element here. Why was that always picking up this magenta-y, burgundy, whatever color, right? Plum that it's picking up down there. Why is it doing that? That is actually due to another global setting. Okay, and that one, if we click the hamburger, we go to site settings, it is actually picking up a typography. I'm going to come back to typography later in a bit more detail, okay? But I'm just going to touch on that right now while we're here as we look at the color. If you scroll down to over here where we have the link, there is no color applied. However, regardless of whether you tick or not, it picks up that color. So if you don't like the link color, this is where now you might want to have a think about and you go, right, okay, in fact, no, well, you know what we'll do? We'll turn it into a blue. Like that, just so it kind of, because we don't have much blue on there. However, there is a problem that kicks in the minute you do that. Did you notice the button in the top right over here? Look at that. The button has also gone blue. So this is where you now have to have a bit of a think about what you want to do. So by setting this to be blue, or the secondary color, I might now want to actually go into the button and set a different color for that. So have a think about that. I mean, this is dead easy to do. I mean, it's not difficult, right? You just go over to your button, click it, go to style, set the color to be white, and you're back to where you were before. But you do have to have a think about that. Don't just go changing your link colors without thinking it through for what else will change across your website. Let's now move on to typography. Now, to explain this a bit better, we do have to look at custom fonts before we start to explain why have I got all these different units. Let's click the hamburger, site settings, and we go to global fonts. Now, if you are just using the fonts that Elementor gives you, you might not realize this, but you're fetching from Google. And you might kind of go, I'm not fetching, they're already loaded. No, they're not actually loaded. They are fetching from the Google website. If you care about GDPR or anything like that, or you don't want this slight, subtle delay to affect your page speed performance, then I strongly recommend that once you know what Google fonts you're going to be using, Lato, Montserrat, Poppins, whatever, you download them, okay? You go over to your website, your WordPress, you go to Elementor, you go to custom fonts, and what you do is you load the fonts in. How'd you do that? Really, really easy. Just click add new. Go and add in your font name, whatever you want to call it. If it's Railway, call it Railway. You know, don't, when I say call it anything you want, I actually mean call it the name of the font. Hit add font variation. You might have loaded in different sizes, 100, 300, 500, 700, whatever. Pick your size. And then go and upload your file. It's best to try and get a WAF2 file if you can. If you can't, fine, go with what you got. But what you do is you click upload, and then if you've got your fonts or whatever they are in your media library, click it, install it, and away you go. Once that's all custom loaded, you can now apply them to be the defaults for these global fonts. Let me just take the text one as an example. Don't be surprised when you click on any of these that you see Roboto, Roboto Slab, or Roboto Condensed. Mainly because 9 times out of 10, a lot of browsers have that as their default font. So even if you do not custom load or preload them, it might not affect your page speed performance. But please don't always just assume that. Custom load them in, okay? And then what you would do is for each of these items, just scroll all the way to the top and select one of them. Now, I'm going to select Ubuntu for a moment for the text one, okay? And you'll see the text kind of looks quite similar because Ubuntu and Roboto aren't that dissimilar. Now, each of these items, if I just hit update and I click on this text, go to typography, you'll notice here the family is default. I haven't selected Ubuntu. I've just left it as default. Now, if I was to go in and individually set this, I'm going to make a pointer, you see, and set this to be Arial. Okay, that is now Arial. That's what I've set it at. It's not custom loaded. I've just gone and selected it. Not a great way to do things because you're going to be fetching from Google. But the other three, the first two and the last one are set to default. This one is set to Arial. Let's now go back over to our site settings, global fonts. Okay, and remember, all of these are text. Primary and secondary will not affect these, okay? Only the text will. Unless it was a heading, then the primary would kick in. So let me now click the text. This is currently set to Ubuntu. Now, if I go down here and I pick this fancy font, which is custom loaded, watch what happens. Can you see that? The third one did not change, but the first, second, and fourth did. Why? Because they're set to default. So whatever I do with my global font, okay, over here, we're in the global fonts, right? That will affect where you've set default. So if you want to be really methodical and efficient, this is a great way to affect your text. However, it does not stop you going into an individual element and going, you know what? I don't care what the global one is. For this bit of text, I'm going to do something extra special. So you can go and do that. I'll put everything back to default. So that is kind of where the global font kicks in. But did you notice that even though I had the option, if I so wanted, to change the weighting or the size, I didn't? And I do feel like all of this is a little bit misleading. I strongly recommend you do not set your size or your weight or your transform or your anything here. You do not do that here, okay? You only use the global font for the font. It's almost a clue there, right? Global font family. That is all you touch. Do not do any of the other settings. And you're probably thinking, well, what if I do? What if I do want my text to be a size, whatever I want it to be? Well, that is where you now use the typography global setting, okay? You click into typography. This is where you now set it. So we go to the body typography. The family is default because the global font, we've already set that for the text, right? So it will inherit that. So I don't need to touch that. I could if I want, but I don't have to. Now here's where you can set the size. Now I'll tell you now, no matter what I do here, it's not going to touch any of these because I've already gone in and overwritten the values, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But if I was to go in here and say the body of the text will now be 25 pixel, everywhere where you've used text will be 25 pixel. And it would also affect any items up here, like the text here, probably some of the text here, or the text in the tabs as well. Okay, so some of that will get modified. This is also where you can mess around with your weighting, your style, your transformation in terms of uppercase, line height, letter spacing, and all of that. This is where you do everything I've just told you not to do in the global font. Global font is a family. Everything else you do here. And the same goes with your link, which we've already touched on when we were looking at the color. We were looking at the color, but the typography you could now do here. Again, you could go in and go, well, okay, is it going to use a different font family that you've custom loaded, or one of the ones? I don't know, something else you want to use for. And the same with the headers as well. And you got all these items. Now, you don't have to go through these. I don't always do this because I like to flex things as I'm building, and then I might go back and redefine it. But it's not a bad idea to contradict myself to go and do that. So every time you add in a H1, it will always be a certain size. And also, please do bear in mind that the sizes you set here are for the desktop. You can click here and go and do it for the tablet, and of course for the mobile as well. Ignore what you see on screen because I'm only doing this tutorial on desktop, but you get the idea. So in terms of setting your fonts and your colors, sorry, not your colors, let me get this right. Your font family and your typography, you do them in separate areas, okay? But it is still all in global settings. Does that make sense? I know a lot of people who have gone over to global font and they've gone and touched all of these items. And then they do something in typography. And then when they start to mess around here, they're like, hold on, I set it. Why is it too big or too small? This is probably the reason why. The text here should all be roughly the same size. 16 pixel, 1 EM, 1 REM, and 1.4 VW, which is viewpoint width. I don't fully understand why I would ever want to use the viewpoint width. My understanding was that you could use that to make the letter fill, you could have one letter per screen, or you could say the letter must only be 50% of the screen. I have found via testing it doesn't always seem to follow that. So even though I've put it in, I don't always recommend that you might not want to use it. The one I do recommend though is the REM. So each one of these, if you go over to the style, you go to typography, you have pixel, EM, REM, and VW. Keep it simple. EM is a font unit. REM is a more responsive version of that unit. I prefer REM when you're using fonts. Now, in these 4 examples, you can see what I've gone and used. The basis with using pixels, which I don't recommend for fonts, is that will stay 16 pixel no matter how big the screen is, okay? No matter what I do, no matter what the root HTML is or anything like that. Until I change that value to be 32 or 50 pixel, it will not get any bigger or smaller. I'm going to jump to the 1.4 viewpoint width because I've already kind of said I'm not really going to use this, but the only reason I set it as 1.4 was to get it to be a similar size to the 3 above, but I'm going to ditch that one. I'm only going to focus now on the EM and REM. I'm pretty sure you're going to be okay with what I said about the pixel. It is what it is. But the 1 EM and 1 REM, I've set them to 1, and at the moment they match 16 pixel. Because by default, a lot of browsers, the default unit is actually 16 pixel. So whenever you put a 1, that's what you get. If you put in 2 EM or 2 REM, you will get 32 pixels. 2 times 16, 32. Makes logical sense. But how do you define what the unit is? Because by default, it is 16 pixel. Now here's where you're going to have a bit of a brain scratch, and it's actually quite easy if you follow this. If we go over here to our site settings and we go to typography, and I go to where I have my body, typography over here, if I leave this at pixel, and I now go in and type in, say, 20, you might have seen the screen move there. Can you see that 1 EM has gone and expanded? Let me make it a bit more bigger. Let's go with 30. That 1 EM is now equal to 30. The 16 pixel has not changed. The 1 REM has not changed. But the EM is now equal to 30 pixel. So if I was to now update this, and I was to now click on this text, go to style, go over here, and it is currently 1 EM. Let me change this to be 2. That is now 2 times 30, 60 pixel. And if you don't believe me, let me go over here to the pixel one and change that to be 60. Look at that. That's a bang on match. Give or take, I know there's extra letters in the one above, but that's a bang on match. Let's put that back to 16. So the EM is defined by the typography. So if you've gone over here and you've set your typography to be, say, 16 pixel or whatever, that will actually define what happens here with your EM. So please bear that in mind, because if you're using EM for your margins or your paddings or anything like that, and you've gone and set your body pixel to be 50, one EM is now 50 pixel. Does that make sense? Let me pop the EM back to 1. Let's go back over to typography, and I'm just going to delete what we have here. And when you leave it empty, it defaults back to 16. So bear that in mind as well. You don't have to put the 16 in. Now, what about the REM? Well, the typography value did not touch the REM. To modify that, which again is defaulted to 16, you have to go and drop in some CSS code. If we go back over to our site settings, and we go down here to Custom CSS, this is where you could drop it in, or you could drop it in anywhere in your theme customizer, or anywhere basically where you have the ability to add in some CSS. I'm just going to drop it into Custom CSS, and I'm going to drop in this little bit of code here. This is saying the HTML size is 16. Well, that's what it is as default. And if you were to go to a mobile size, the maximum width is up to 600 pixel. Now I want you to still apply 16 pixel. Let me show you what happens if I now change this. And by the way, this will affect the EM as well. Let me now change this to be, let's go with 30. That has now changed the EM and the REM. But if we were to now go to a mobile view, they are now back to 16 pixel because we've made it clear over here. Again, ignore the VW, all right, because it's adjusted. I mean, you can see how it works, okay? The smaller width of the screen, and it's adjusted it. If you want to go with that, go with it. I'm not going to waste any time on it. But can you see that? And if I was to change this now to be 40 pixel instead, it would apply 40 to the mobile. I've made them be 16 pixel again. So if we were to go in now and make this be REM2, and let's say the value here was 30 pixel, it would be 2 times 30 equals 60. This is how you adjust the root HTML. Now, if you're okay with your HTML being standard defaulted to 16, go for it. But I am starting to find a lot of people are now actually preferring this. So if you were to change this now to be 10 and 10 like that, that is now 10. So now I know that if I do 2 REM, it will be 20 pixel. If I do 1.5 REM, it will be 15 pixel. Now, what is the benefit of using REM? What can happen is if you start to be very methodical with how you set your sizes, as you move between screen sizes from desktop to tablet to mobile, it will be much more responsive. Now, don't get me wrong. You don't have to do this, because I'm sure some of you are going, yeah, but in Elementor, I can set my desktop, tablet, mobile size. Why would I do this? Well, at the moment, you're probably going through individual typographies and elements and doing that. But if you set this here and say, here's the root HTML for the mobile, up to 600, say, then up to tablet, here's the value, then for desktop, here's the value. Now, all you're going to do is literally when you're building your website, you're just going to say, right, the header is always going to be 1.4 maybe. And if your desktop size was 20 pixels, for instance, 1.4 would be 28 pixels because 1.4 times 20. Whereas if your mobile size was 10, then the 1.4 would now be 14 pixels. So you just do it like almost once and it will kind of inherit and work its way through. So it can be a more methodical way of doing things, but it's entirely up to you what you want to go for. But if you were ever confused by the EM and the REM and where is it picking it up, typography for the EM, but it won't touch the REM. But if you want to touch both of them, then go and stick it in here in Custom CSS. I'll put that code in the description. That will now allow you to define your REM. Now let's move on to the last item, which is what do you use for margins and paddings and stuff like that? And I know this is kind of going a little bit beyond the global settings and all of that, but I think it's kind of important to appreciate, especially because we just covered EM and REM. So here we have 4 boxes, and let me just show you how it's built. It's basic section. We got 4 columns. I hate it when the page scrolls all the way back to the top. Right, we got 4 columns. So for the first box, we have 15% margin and padding. So here's your 15%, and then here's the 15% padding inside, okay? And there we have our item. Just to prove it, if I change that to a 1, you can see the padding is removed. If we change that to a 1, you can see the margin is removed over there. So that should be quite self-explanatory. The thing about percentages, though, is that they can be slightly unpredictable, so that what looks good as, say, 1 or 2%, the minute you switch to, say, a mobile, might now suddenly look a little bit varied. I mean, look at that. You might look at that and go, yeah, I'm okay with that. But I sometimes like to have a bit more control, which is why I tend to use pixels or EM or even REM. I have to be honest, I sometimes pick and choose what I want to go for. I don't always use percentage for the simple reason of what you've seen there, where it might look okay here, but then it might not look so good on other devices. The pixels is pretty self-explanatory, really. Margin padding all the way around. If I change that to a 1, look, it's almost completely disappeared there. So you can see what's going on there. The thing about pixel, though, is that it's static, right? So if you go and say, my section will have 15 pixel left and right padding on the desktop, tablet, mobile, it will always have 15. And sometimes, if you want to be very controlling over how far things are from the sides, that can work for you quite well. Maybe even if you're being very specific over margins, you know, with layout of your sections or containers as well. Again, that's entirely up to you. Now, when we get over to the EM and REM, we've already discussed the impact of the font, how the EM, the typography, you can change the unit to go from a default 16 pixel to be whatever you want, and that would also apply here. Or with the REM, if you go and add in a root HTML, it actually affects the EM as well. So here we have, again, we have like EM1, and over here we have REM1, okay? So now let me just go over here to where we have that custom CSS. I don't need to do the typography again because you knew that only affected the EM. So if we go over here, right, the 1 EM and 1 REM is equal to 16 pixel. If I change it to be 1 pixel, look at that. Everything has just shrunk away. I mean, even the text has, by the way, because I'd copied the text from above to be 1 REM, so ignore the fact that that's all changed. Let's change this to be, no, let's not go for 20. Let's go with 50. Look at that. The font has changed because all of the fonts in there are using EM and REM. But can you see what's happened? Percentage here is the same. The pixel is the same, but the EM and REM has shrunk down. What happens when we get to the tablet, though? Sorry, not the tablet, the mobile. Well, the percentage is still the percentage. The pixel is still stuck in stone. The EM and REM has changed to be 10 pixel because we defined it. But if I was to go and change this now to be 50 pixel as well, by the way, excuse the font has gone ridiculously weird. I know a lot of people watching this are going to kind of go, what the heck, I still don't get it. If you appreciate that your root HTML is 16, and you start to use like custom values like this to define almost in fact what the breakpoints are, like I said earlier, and these aren't breakpoints, by the way, you're defining what the unit is for different whips and stuff like that. You can start to be very clinical on how things look. And I actually prefer to set everything to be 10, like this. Okay, I prefer to set everything to be 10. And then I can define how things will look. So if I set my REM to be, say, 10 pixel, on the desktop, I might go for 2 REM, on the tablet, 1.5 REM, on the mobile, 1.4, 1. Whatever you're going to adjust it to. And it will start to apply those similar units, or however it calculates and works it out, to your margin and your padding as well. Hey, I know that was a lot to take in, but I hope that clarifies your global colors, where they apply, and how if you untick or tick those settings in your Elementor, how it can change what you're looking at. Your global fonts for your font family, your typography for your actual sizing and weightings and stuff like that, and how you can start to appreciate EM, REM, root HTML, and how pixels are a little bit stuck in stone, but that's not a bad thing as well sometimes. Hey, I'm Imran, Web Squadron. Like, subscribe, share, and follow. I'll see you soon.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, bitch,